Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being with me this next hour. You're listening to Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks on Transcendental Tuesdays here on 12 Radio, and we are simulcasting on my YouTube channel, which is the same name as the show, Everyday Astrology with C.A. This is January 20th, 2026, and on today's show, we are going to take a look at the week ahead, which actually is a look at sort of the month or the next 6 weeks ahead, and maybe even further. We're going to do a dive into eccentric and ever interesting Aquarius. And it's funny because as I'm putting my notes together, I'd like to have these keywords, and I'm thinking, this is a deep dive. And I found myself continuing to take out the word deep. And I thought, okay, what's that about? And part of what that is about is realizing that in a show that lasts 55 minutes, there's almost no way to dive deeply into Aquarius, especially with everything that is going on in Aquarius at this time. So I'm not even going to pretend that we're doing hardly anything but scratching the surface. So what is going on in the sign of Aquarius? Well, Venus entered Aquarius last Saturday. That was January 17th. And so, of course, that starts putting us in that mindset because, of course, that's the way the cosmos works. The Sun and Venus and Mercury in particular move, about every month and change signs. So sometimes they're really close together. Sometimes Venus and Mercury, they're a little bit, either ahead or they're behind. But we have Venus in Aquarius. She was the first to go in. The Sun was right on the heels of Venus and moved into Aquarius yesterday. Now, that was Monday the 19th, if you're not listening to this live. Today, January 20th, Mercury, the planet of thinking, connecting the dots, the way we communicate, it enters Aquarius today. And on Friday, January 23rd, Mars is going to be in Aquarius. And of course, if you're into astrology at all, don't ever forget Pluto is in Aquarius and will be until 2044. So now that one, of course, is not moving away anytime soon. That's kind of a background or a very interesting energy that is sitting there as these other, what we call faster moving planets, kind of shoot through Aquarius. Each of them are going to touch base with Pluto. Pluto's the transformer, the element of change, the shapeshifter, so to speak. All kinds of energy with Pluto, but it's always, I would say, serious, profound, changes our lives. So as those planets all meet up with Pluto, there will be kind of a little more feeling of seriousness about their transit through Aquarius. So I would also refer you back, and I'll do this quickly, but I really always want to steer you towards Mark's Power Peak. That is an online digital newsletter. It comes out every single week. It comes to your email box if you sign up. There is no charge. It's absolutely free. And I write an article that is not numerology, although I use numerology too, but it's astrologically based. And so if you want to go back and say, hey, what's happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, I'm going to detail pretty much what's going on every single day. Because I don't know about you, but I don't expect you to remember a lot of this stuff. But sometimes, like I found myself yesterday, I went back and read that a couple times going, what the heck? Because I thought, what was I thinking when I was really in that zone and thinking about the energy of Monday? So I go back and read it myself. And I would just encourage you to do that. If you're not subscribed, go to 12listen.com and you'll see a link. Mark's Power Peak, just go subscribe for free. And of course, we don't give out your email addresses to anybody else. So you're not going to start getting a lot of advertisements. Okay. So moving into the cosmic dance for this week, January 19th, it's Aquarius all over the place. And one of my first thoughts about this is if we're feeling weary, and I mean physically, you're just weary, exhausted by kind of what I call the ambitious and striving pace of Capricorn, then there's good news for you this week. And here again, I was listening to a little bit of Serena's show before I came on the air today. And I heard her use the word striving. Now, that's what's fascinating to me about life in general, maybe, and about astrology. Is all this stuff, it's out there. You don't have to be an astrologer or know any of these things. People pick up on the energy when they're intuitive and when they're just listening to themselves. And that has been the pace. Very striving, because we've had a lot of planets in Capricorn, and Capricorn is that go-getter. It's ambition. Now, we're not going to lose all of that, but what we're going to do is we're going to moderate it in a slightly different direction. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. That's the planet of discipline. Well, along comes the next sign, and this is true of every single sign. They're going to look at the sign before and say, hey, wait a minute, where have we gone overboard? Or where has there been excess? So along comes Aquarius and says, okay, no. We don't need all these rules. We don't need all these structures. We don't have to be quite this disciplined. So all those planets that have had their, so to speak, noses to the grindstone, planning and organizing and hardworking in Capricorn, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, well, they're all coming to the Aquarian party. And the Aquarian party is one that's progressive, freedom-loving. It's the 11th sign of the Zodiac. Now, before we discovered Uranus, as mankind, before we developed the telescope and we knew that Uranus was out there, in traditional astrology, or even in Vedic astrology still, Saturn was the ruler of Aquarius. And I will admit, Uranus is that planet of unpredictability. It's the planet within us or we ascribe these meanings to it. It's the planet that helps us understand where a structure, where a discipline, where something, a routine, a habit, it's just gotten too limiting. And we're not growing. We're not really stretching ourselves. So Uranus comes along and helps us realize where that's happening. So as a young astrologer, or when I first started studying, I thought, Saturn, ruler, the traditional ruler of Aquarius, how can that be? That, I really struggled at first to figure out how those things came together. However, once you get to know Aquarius, you really understand, you see that influence of Saturn in Aquarius, especially because they're so willful, headstrong, love to argue, and persistent when it comes to opinions. Now, I'm emphasizing that because there are words, there are concepts that certainly go along with Aquarius. And being opinionated is one of them. Because once again, Aquarius, unlike Capricorn, which is Earth, Aquarius is an air sign, which means it's related to the mind. It's related to communication. So as we are thinkers and gathering information, we form opinions, right? So that's one of the things you'll find with Aquarius energy. Even though, like I said, I certainly see the strength and the authority of Saturn coming through sometimes. But most Western astrologers do acknowledge Uranus as this planet that rules Aquarius. And there's a couple of words I definitely want you to take away today. And as usual, I have way too much information to share, which is another reason I'm saying we're not taking exactly a deep dive, because there's so much more that we can talk about. But there's a few words I want you to take away with you, a few ideas. And awakening is one of them, because Uranus, in fact, is often referred to as the Great Awakener. And I really like this idea, maybe even more so than calling Aquarius the sign of rebellion and revolution. Now, it is all of those things. But to me, it's that inside gut level thing of we wake up to something. It's when we wake up and realize that this habit isn't serving me. This structure is not what I need anymore. I've outgrown these clothes, or I've outgrown these friends, or I've outgrown the house or something. And there again, it doesn't mean necessarily that we have to expand, but it just means that something is limiting us or holding us back. And along comes Uranus and says, hey, wake up, people, smell the coffee. So if you want to tie an idea to Aquarius and to Uranus, it's the idea of awakening. So this is a very mental sign. Another kind of misconception I wanted to address is that it's called the water bearer. And I've actually had people call me and say, hey, you've got to settle a bet for me. And I'm like, okay, this is an interesting, quest. And they say, Aquarius is a water sign, right? I told my friend, I bet him $10 that it's a water sign. And I said, no, get out your wallet. It's not a water sign. And I know that can seem kind of confusing. But think of it as this is a sign that is flooding the universe and our minds and our, with thoughts and ideas and knowledge and visions. This is a sign that's idealistic, humanitarian, and here's another word that I want you to kind of attach to Aquarius. It's hopeful. It needs to feel like there's hope beyond those existing structures that don't seem to be working. But it's not water, it's mental air. So that water bearer, maybe it's pouring out water, but it is pouring out ideas and thoughts and knowledge. And it's one of the fixed signs in astrology. So it's very persistent and loyal, and some would say stubborn and opinionated. That's probably, once again, an endowment of Saturn, which was its traditional ruler. So the mythology that goes along with Aquarius is Prometheus. And Prometheus was the god. I mean, there's so many different mythologies, but this one's Greek. He was a Greek titan. And he was considered to be a master craftsman, a teacher of arts and sciences, mathematics, medicine, civilization, culture, prophecy. And he was dedicated to the education and development of Earth and of the human beings, the mortals that were living on Earth. But you know how mythology goes. Those gods are often portrayed as being very jealous or just doing things that don't seem to be as exactly high-minded. And they're prone to be treating people like pieces on a chessboard. So Prometheus basically decides that it's time that mortals need a huge advance. And that would include teaching them about fire. Now, even if you've never studied history, you don't think about it. Fire was an incredible development. It changed all of our lives. Think about, we could eat things that before we could not eat, etc. I mean, that's a whole dialogue in itself. Fire was very important. So that was the plan for Prometheus. But guess what? The other gods said, I don't think so. We're not going to go there. We don't want them getting too hoity-toity. We don't want them getting too developed, or however they put it. But they just said, no, that's not going to happen. Well, Prometheus, this is where Aquarius comes in. He was idealistic, and he was set on doing what he thought was the right thing to do. That's what often you're going to hear with an Aquarian, whether it's their sun or their Mercury, their Mars, their Venus, whatever it is in their chart. Maybe it's their Jupiter or their Saturn. Here again, I want you to realize that as I'm talking today, and even I'll be speaking about some specific people, it's not necessarily that their sun is Aquarius. Maybe it's another planet or a series of other planets that are sitting in Aquarius. But the energy comes through so strongly. And Prometheus, that idealism, that sense of, I know what's right and I'm going to do it, regardless of the fact that my family, my country, my whatever doesn't think this is the right thing to do. So here's Prometheus basically defying the gods and says, I'm going to do this anyway. So he stole the fire and brought it to Earth as a gift for the world's continued survival and development. But these are Aquarian things too. His punishment was swift, severe, and isolating. And I'm going to stress isolating, even though we're not going to talk a whole lot about that today. He was tied to a rock, and every day a great eagle tortured him by eating out his liver. Now, he was immortal, so what happened? It would grow back, and it was a continuing story, day after day after day. But there again, that seems very Aquarian. We're always on this quest for this great idealistic world, or this picture of how life could be, and we never give up. We do it day after day after day. We do defy people in our lives. We seek to be aligned with those people who think like us. But when they don't, we're going to trade them in for somebody else. We're going to get the group that's going in the direction that we want to go. So that punishment that goes along with Prometheus and Aquarius, sometimes it is isolation or the feeling of being a loner, the feeling of being an outsider, not belonging, not being, I hear Aquarians say literally, I was born at the wrong time. I was born in the wrong country. I was born to the wrong parents. And I laugh because that's the Aquarian story. Something about I don't belong and I am struggling to find my group. I'm struggling to find my cause. I'm struggling to find where do I belong. But it's the dance. And in some ways, every single sign has a dance. And Aquarian's dance includes trying to figure out where you belong. And when it becomes obvious that you're someplace where you really don't belong, when the idealism comes up and you're saying, you know what, I just can't go along with this anymore, something within me is calling me to something different, then we leave that group. We break those bonds and we move on. And so, sometimes I ask myself, well, if Prometheus knew what the price was going to be that he had to pay, would he have done it? And my answer is, yep, I think he would have. And one of the reasons is because I think we witness Aquarian energy every single day. Now, we may not be tuned into it all the time, but think about it. In the voices of an incredible teacher, a provocative teacher, or a mentor, the voices of protesters, all kinds of small and big acts of everyday rebellion. The inspirational commentary that we hear in songs. Think about how many songs just were really written as protests or written to inspire people. We hear it in the voices of podcasters and late night talk show hosts. And I'll tell you where we also hear it. In those little voices of 3-year-olds who demand that they can choose their own clothes, dress themselves, and not eat their peas. That is Aquarian saying, I need to be an individual. I need to do this myself. I mean, isn't the 2-year-old word? Myself and mine. That is the spirit of Aquarius. So when we're filled with this kind of energy, and here again, even if you don't have a single planet in your chart that is Aquarian, you still are going to sense this energy in the universe at this time. And what is it? It is independence, being unconventional, not minding so much if we're oddballs. In fact, we kind of like it when we're different. If you ever met somebody who they were just determined not to be like everybody else, they almost certainly had Aquarius in their chart. It's the energy of being outspoken, but also fair-minded. Here's another word that you're always going to hear with Aquarius: equality. Egalitarian. We're willing to stand up and fight for the rights of others as well as for ourselves. Progressive ideas and the future are considered more important and valuable than the past and traditions, especially traditions that are built on fading or obsolete values or technology. Because once again, it's Saturn who's built all the structures, but eventually those structures probably don't fit where we're going. And so if they're not working, if they're limiting instead of supporting us, then we're trying to break through. Another word is friendly. Aquarius is friendly and gregarious. They're social and they're quirky. That's one of the ways to describe it. They're, when you really feel that Aquarian energy, it's not like anybody else. It's different. But another thing, despite the enthusiasm, don't ever lose sight of the fact that this is mental air. So sometimes, when somebody's really into Aquarian energy, they kind of lack the true depth of emotional feeling and attachment, because these are relationships between like minds, relationships with ideas and concepts, especially abstract concepts. Friendship is often elevated over romantic love. And I see that a lot with Aquarians. They're off doing something with their friends and leaving their spouse or their loved ones at home. And they're going, what about us? Well, friendship just, it's up there. It's at the top of the list. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not good people to be with, but just be understanding of that, knowing friendship is often more important than actually a person that you're romantically involved with. And it's easy for Aquarius to get lost in ideological concepts with little appreciation for the complexity of everyday life and grounding ideas and visions in practical ways. In fact, I was telling Serena already, oftentimes I don't feel the energy. I kind of think the energy, but not so much feel it. But man, yesterday I was starting to feel so incredibly ungrounded. I mean, in a way that I had not felt for a long time. And I'm not going to blame Aquarius, but you know what? I think it's that influx. The wind is blowing, so to speak. And we need to remember how to stay grounded because Aquarius really, I mean, there again, it's about the protests. And okay, so you're going to break this down. Well, what are you going to replace it with? Well, where's your idea? Do you have an idea? I mean, Saturn kind of comes in and goes, okay, what's the purpose here? You broke it down all right. Now, what's next? So Aquarius can get lost in that, up in the clouds, being ideological, but not having a plan for what it's going to look like next. But on the other hand, I really do associate Aquarius with brilliant, brilliant people. Now, not every brilliant person has Aquarian in their chart, but I'm going to name some people that I think do have Aquarius, not necessarily the sun, but Aquarius strong in their chart. Aquarius is the mind of the inventor and the social reformer, like Thomas Edison, Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, Maya Angelou. It's the mind of the rebel and the revolutionary, like George Washington, James Dean, and Elton John as a musician. Now, James Dean, I think, is interesting because, of course, he died very young, but he made a movie called Rebel Without a Cause. I mean, when I think about that, I just have to smile. That is Aquarius when they're on the edge. When they push things maybe a little bit too far, that is Aquarius, a rebel without a cause. So there again, that's something we have to think about. Or sometimes it should be a little cautionary. Are we really listening to ourselves? Are we really getting, direct communication and acting on something that we know is real? Or are we just trying to act out, period? So that one I always think is interesting, James Dean. This is the mind of the trendsetters like Helen Gurley Brown, Oprah Winfrey. And I throw in this category Jules Verne, who was basically a science fiction writer, and Wayne Gretzky, who is a famous hockey player. And when I say famous, he is literally considered, the greatest of all time. I mean, it's only even been recently that people have started breaking his records. He was just a phenomenal hockey player. I mean, he's still alive, but a phenomenal hockey player. And this is the mind of people with the thirst for knowledge, new ideas, and their understanding of a topic is insatiable. And there again, I put Thomas Edison in that group too, Rachel Maddow, the broadcaster, Benjamin Franklin, and Leonardo da Vinci. I always put Leonardo in this group, even though I think he only has one planet in Aquarius. I think it was Mars. But anyway, hopefully we'll get to him a little bit too. Because I do have, obviously, me, I love to kind of explain astrology by the personalities that are involved. And there again, I've got so much information on that. I know we're not going to get to a lot of it, but, just even kind of taking away, one or two people and thinking, yeah, this is the energy of Aquarius. So Aquarius is fascinated by conversations and discussions that focus on abstract concepts. And the more progressive and provocative, the better. But here again, don't expect a lot of personal revelations, because here again, sometimes what happens is you hear an Aquarian or that kind of energy, they're talking all over the place about interesting ideas and political opinions and the future, but they're not necessarily talking about themselves or their feelings. It's much more detached than that. In fact, that's one thing people often say about Aquarian energy. They're detached. Now, I don't necessarily think that's true, but I just think they're in a different place, and they're in a different place often in the way they're talking about it. But one more idea that I want to give to you to kind of hang on to, that I think is really helpful when you're thinking about Aquarian energy, is it's sort of like a baby being born. Because here's this baby developing for 9 months, and the body is very useful. The placenta is a necessary organ that keeps them safe and feeds them and nurtures them, right? But in order for their life to continue, to expand, to grow, to live, they're going to have to break through that placenta. And sometimes I think about it, birth is a lot of times messy, and it can certainly feel abrupt and even traumatic. And that seems like Uranus, that seems like Aquarius. But it's one of the first of many, many, many endings and new beginnings in our lives. And so when you think about it, the whole idea of birth, a baby being born, is very, very Uranian, because they're in this safe little place being taken care of. And all of a sudden they're thrust, and I'm not going to say all of a sudden, it's the natural process, thrust into a whole new environment. But why does it happen? It's inevitable. And sometimes I think about that word too with Aquarius. It's inevitable. This change had to happen. This building was, 2,000 years old. It wasn't going to stand forever. Or this structure wasn't going to work. It may have worked really, really well when you were 5 or 25. And now maybe not so much. We're always looking for breakthroughs in our lives. But when Aquarius comes around, we become so incredibly conscious of wanting and needing a breakthrough. And it could be something small, or it could be something big, and it could be a series of breakthroughs. Now, here's another thing that I've noticed as I look at a lot of people that have Aquarian energy, and specifically as I was going through some of their writings and trying to find some good quotes for you, one word kept popping up. Now, actually, several words did, but the one word that just continually kept popping up is resolve. And I thought it was interesting. Now, some of these people, they are, 200 years old, whatever. So maybe they use words like that. But how often do you say to your friends, I resolve to do the following? And I thought that's a different kind of word. I mean, we often throw around, hey, I intend to do this, or I'm going to. But that word kept coming up in quotes. And from, people, more modern people too, they use the word resolve. And so I looked it up and I thought, what does that really mean? And some of the dictionary things or meanings were to find an answer, to make clear or understandable, to reach a firm decision, to declare or decide by a formal resolution, to change by resolution, to make sure, to cause. It's unshakable, and it has to do with determination and decisiveness and persistence. So I'm just offering that because, maybe you might even try using it. I resolve to. That just, like I said, that kept popping up. And I'm not going to give those all to you today, but I thought, wow, that is interesting that word just keeps coming up with Aquarius. And there again, if I look at those charts, there might be another sign that they have in common that we could put that with too, because it does sound very Capricorn to me. But I just wanted to throw that out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through those planets moving in various, or the various planets moving through the sign. And here again, I think especially when we've got a week when they're all changing, it would be maybe kind of silly to go, oh, well, that's Mercury in Aquarius. That's not Mars. Or that's Venus in Aquarius. That's not the sun. Because I'm not sure how you take all those pieces apart. How do you take all those threads that are building an experience or building a picture and say, oh, well, this one, is different. Or, we don't need to argue about that. So rather, I'm giving you some examples of people. And by the way, here too, astrologically speaking, the sun and Mercury and Mars in the sky, astronomy, are fairly close together. Now, when I say that, of course, it's relative. But the idea, what I'm trying to say is Mercury and Venus are never very far away from the sun. They're usually either in the same sign as the sun, or they're in the sign before or the sign after. And there again, they don't travel at the same speed. I mean, the sun usually goes through one sign every 30 days. Mercury about on average every 21 days, and Venus a little bit longer than that. So that's why sometimes we do see them all bunching up, but they won't stay bunched up because they're not moving at the same speed in their orbits. But when you look at Mars, Mars doesn't stay that close to the sun. And it takes 2.5 years for Mars to come back to a particular location. So the fact that Mars is now hanging out in Aquarius, or will be, with the sun and Mercury and Venus, that is significant. And it pumps up, amps up the energy, as does Pluto. So yeah, this is really interesting to have Mars kind of come around and be there. Mars will be there for about 6 weeks. So, and that's, a different kind of energy. So in some ways we will see some things we go, okay, that's the difference between Mercury and Mars. Mercury may be talking about it. Mars is taking action. So yes, if you really wanted to split hairs, you could do some things like that. But let's look at a few of the people. And here again, like I said, some of these people, they're going to have multiple planets in Aquarius. First person is Abraham Lincoln. And the other thing, of course, and this is true too, because it's Aquarius, you're going to see a number of these people actually have some Capricorn planets, but a lot of them have Pisces planets as well. Often a person with the sun in Pisces then might have Mercury and Venus and or Mars in Aquarius. So Abraham Lincoln had his sun and Chiron sitting in Aquarius, and I think he was Pisces sun. And the one thing I've got, obviously I could go through so many quotes, but I think it's maybe more important to throw out some of the names because then you can look up some of the stuff yourself. But the one quote, people say it all the time, but I think it is just so Aquarian and it's so Abraham Lincoln. In his inaugural address, he said, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature." When you hear that statement, better angels, I really do think Abraham Lincoln was the first person that said it. I mean, in this day and age, so many people use things over and over, but I think he was the first person that said it. And it is so Aquarian. Just begging people, let's put the enemy stuff behind us. We must remember the mystic chords. We must remember what binds us together. So the better angels, I love that statement for him. And here's another one that I think is so perfect for Aquarius. Be sure to put your feet in the right place, then stand firm. Because that's it. I'm idealistic. I know what the right thing is to do, and I'm not going to move away from that point. That is Aquarius. Now, another thing he said is, I'm not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I am not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live up to what light I have. Very Aquarian. And I'm not saying that winning or succeeding wasn't important to him. But the idea that living up to the light that he had, being true to himself, that was what was important. That's where you see the sun in, and I'm sorry, I think I said Pisces, sun in Aquarius. He had some Pisces energy, but anyway, sun in Aquarius. And he was one of those people that said, use the word resolve. Always bear in mind that your own resolution to succeed is more important than any one thing. And this to me is Aquarius also. The probability that we may fail in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause that we believe in, or that we believe to be just. So that's Abraham Lincoln, obviously so many more. And of course, I mentioned James Dean, who also does have some quotes. He said, when an actor plays a scene exactly the way a director orders, it isn't acting, it's following instructions. Anyone with physical qualifications can do that. So see, that sounds very Aquarian. And James Dean had the sun in Aquarius. Now, Thomas Edison, sun, Mercury, and Neptune. Now, we're not talking about Neptune today, but here, and there again, if you need a refresher, Mercury's the mind. It's the way we think. It's the way we communicate. The sun is our ego. So, Thomas Edison, and there again, just so many quotes. But here's one that always makes me smile. He said, "There are no rules here. We're trying to accomplish something." Now, I don't know when he said that or to whom, but I just thought it's so perfect, for Aquarius. Forget the rules. We're trying to really do something. So, there again, Thomas Edison, so many things. Now, I do want to read this one, and it's a little bit long, but I think it's also important, maybe in this particular time period and some of the things that are going on. Thomas Edison said the most necessary task of civilization, and here again, remember that's an Aquarian thing. They want to move civilization forward like Prometheus. So he said the most necessary task of civilization is to teach people how to think. It should be the primary purpose of our public schools. The mind of a child is naturally active. It develops through exercise. Give a child plenty of exercise for body and brain. The trouble with our way of educating is that it does not give elasticity to the mind. It casts the brain into a mold. It insists that the child must accept. It does not encourage original thought or reasoning, and it lays more stress on memory than observation. And I thought, yep, that's an Aquarian. That's Aquarius energy talking. And Helen Gurley Brown, who of course was the publisher of Cosmo, and very, very provocative in her time period. She had Sun and Mercury sitting in Aquarius. And she said, good girls go to heaven, but bad girls go everywhere. Now, see, that's a very provocative, humorous statement, which is another aspect that I wanted to mention. Humor. A lot of times I think Aquarians are really funny. And there again, maybe because that's an age-old way of getting people to think about things is to provoke them with jokes, to provoke them with humor, so that we can kind of look at ourselves and go, ooh, yeah, what does that mean? Why are we doing that? We laugh at ourselves. Now, one other thing she said, how can any woman not be a feminist? The girl I'm editing for wants to be known for herself. If that's not a feminist message, I don't know what is. Because certainly there was a time, I don't even know so much now, but, that was a real big divide. Oh, I'm not a feminist. A lot of people would, want to kind of deny that kind of alliance. Okay, Oprah Winfrey, Sun, Mercury, and Venus, all sitting in Aquarius. And of course, there again, she's got, page after page after page of quotes that we could talk about. But here's the one that goes right with the breakthrough idea. We can't become what we need to be by remaining what we are. She also said real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not. So once again, this is a very, in a sense, personal, private thing with Aquarius. I've got to do what I think is the right thing to do. Now, here's Jules Verne, who is, like I said, the author, Sun and Mercury sitting in Aquarius. And he said, while there is life, there is hope. I beg to assert that as long as a man's heart beats, as long as a man's flesh quivers, I do not allow that a being gifted with thought and will can allow himself to despair. Hope is a big thing for Aquarians. And I would say big in terms of not only are they really a hopeful sign, but they've got to have hope. They've got to find something to attach to. I mean, it's kind of their reason for being, is to move things forward and to feel hopefulness. Okay, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president, had Sun and Venus in Aquarius. And here again, very Aquarian idea about taking care of other people. The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. Egalitarian, taking care of others, we're all in this together kind of thinking. And here again, lots of quotes, but we just can't get into all of them today. Then Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, Sun and Mercury. And here again, what I'd say about Mercury, This is also hand-eye coordination. Mercury is how we connect the dots in terms of communication, but Mercury rules the nervous system in the human body. So oftentimes when you see Sun and Mercury aligned, or when you see really positive aspects between those two planets, you're going to see a person who really does have good hand-eye coordination. That's one reason I wanted to make sure he was in this group. But one thing he said is, and this is famous, you hear people quote this a lot, or at least in the hockey world, but also in motivational speaking, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. See, always thinking of the future. Now, this too sounds very Aquarian. He said it, Wayne Gretzky. Hockey is a unique sport in the sense that you need each other and every guy helping each other and pulling in the same direction to be successful. And I think that's true. When I first read that, I thought, well, isn't that how a lot of sports are? But no, not so much. In hockey, it's much more imperative, much, much more imperative. And some of the best teams are the ones where you see the team really working together, a lot of passing, knowing what the strengths are of each person, not trying to just get all the glory for themselves. Then John Belushi, Sun, Mercury, and Mars. And here again with Mercury, you expect it in terms of thinking, being a comedian, what you're saying, writing scripts. But it was also acting out, a very physical version of Aquarius. And he said, I'm out of control. And I'm not sure exactly when he said that. But he said, the trick is knowing what you want to do and then resolving, there's that word, resolving to do everything you have to do to get there. See, that's Mars in Aquarius. I'm going to do everything I have to do to reach this goal. Carole King, the singer, and wrote a lot of her own music. And in fact, I'm not going to say all of it, but I think so. Sun, Mercury, thinking, and Venus. And the Venus, I think, does come in with the artistry. We'll see that a lot more with people that do have Venus sitting in Aquarius, is they want to be artists. Okay, so being alone gave me a chance to process what my senses took in without having to factor in other people's opinions. See, that sounds Aquarian to me. I want to know what I'm thinking, not what everybody else is thinking. Okay, now, Mercury in Aquarius. If you ask them, what's going on in your mind, I think, and so these people I specifically selected them because of their Mercury in Aquarius. And I think they would say something like, I'm social and I'm friendly and I'll tell it like it is. And, sometimes I seem tactless or maybe a bit abrasive, but I like to share my visions and discuss abstract concepts like liberty and justice and freedom for all. And I like to talk about science and technology and the future and what if. So that's kind of what's going on in the brain of a person with Mercury in Aquarius. And one of the good examples here is Martin Luther King Jr. There again, oodles and oodles and oodles of quotes, simply because he was a writer, he was a speaker, he was a teacher, a lot of public speaking. And so I can't give you so many of the good ones, but one of them is, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. There's that hope word again. And he also said, there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. So see there again, Prometheus, don't you hear that? I've got to do this. This is the right thing to do. I'm going to do it. Okay, Benjamin Franklin also had Mercury in Aquarius. And he said, we are all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid. He was very, and if you know some of the things that he did, in fact, he was one of the first people to ever suggest a subscription library. He got all his friends together and said, hey, we need to bring all our books so that we can all share them, and found a way to pay for it at a time that was just not what was going on. He also said, when you're finished changing, you're finished. So, and there again, look up some of these people. You'll find some incredible stuff. George Washington had Mercury in Aquarius. And obviously just has so many different things, but this is one because it has to do with friendship that I'm going to give you. Associate yourself with men of good quality. If you esteem your own reputation, for it is better to be alone than to be in bad company. He also said, when there is no vision, there is no hope. Okay, another person, Mercury and South Node in Aquarius, is George Harrison. And, how better could an Aquarian say this? He says, sometimes I feel like I'm on the wrong planet. That's what they think. That's what they say. Where the hell am I? In fact, that quote is longer and it ends with, what the hell am I doing here? And he said, it's all in the mind. And there again, listen to some of the lyrics of his songs. All right, let's move on to Venus and Aquarius. So what is she thinking, or what's going on in this person or this energy? I'm an artist of many colors. Don't try to categorize me or pin me down. I love your ideas and your mind, and I value sharing ideas over close emotional attachments, meaning I want to talk about stuff. I don't want this touchy-feely, close emotional thing. I would much rather be talking and discussing, even arguing. That's what gets me going. My sense of humor may be wacky, but I always have a point. It could be a teachable moment, so pay attention. And she's saying, I like to know it all and can be persuasive. And when I really get going, maybe I can even be an evangelist. I attract all kinds of friends and relationships, but I don't like to be fenced in with traditional labels or roles. And subtlety is not my strong suit. Now, that's true actually for all Aquarian energy, but I think maybe especially with Venus. Okay, so who have we got there? Elton John. I'm not going to give you any quotes because all you have to do is conjure up a picture of Elton John and his many lyrics and, his many performances, and you know what I'm talking about, Venus and Aquarius. Now, another performer, songwriter is Phil Collins. And I like this because it's that sense of belonging. And he said, beyond a certain point, the music isn't mine anymore. It's yours. And then another person that has this is William Shatner, who I always think is funny. I mean, truthfully, he does have a quirky, interesting sense of humor. In fact, he said, if someone criticizes my acting, they may be right. And he said, I'm always open to the possibility that somebody's got a better idea than I have. It happens with some frequency. And there again, just some funny things that he would say. Gertrude Stein, the writer, said, whoever said money can't buy happiness simply didn't know where to go shopping. Now, she said that, but she also said a lot of profound things, including disillusionment in living is finding that no one can really ever be agreeing with you completely in anything. Now, do you hear that with Aquarius? I so want to find this like mind, but I realize over and over again that I'm looking for it. I know we're all I know the forms are different, but I know inside we're all the same. But I want there to be that agreement, and it's hard to find. All right. Mars in Aquarius. So what are they saying? What are they thinking? They're saying, I like to put my action where my mouth is. Words mean nothing without action. Flashes of insight send me in unpredictable directions. I want to be and to be thought of as unique, as an individual and a different kind of person. I don't mind living on the edge or becoming involved with unpopular ideas, causes, or groups of people. I'm open-minded, but really, my way is the right way. And you'll see that. There's nothing quite as stimulating as a lively debate. You can count on me to stand up and fight for what is right. Oh, and by the way, diplomacy is rarely my thing. I don't do that. I want to live a life with few or no rules, so I am free to explore and pursue whatever interests me. I'm unconventional and a free thinker, and when it comes to relationships, I like things to be egalitarian. Partners must be like-minded companions and friends. And the person I put in this category is Leonardo da Vinci. And it's interesting because you may know that he was commissioned with so many pieces of artwork that he never finished. He he just has this whole list of things that he just never finished. And he said, art is never finished, it's only abandoned. And he said, once you taste flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward. For there you have been, and there you will always long to return. He also said the greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinions. And he also said, make your work to be in keeping with your purpose. So there again, lots of quotes from him because he filled volumes and volumes and volumes of notebooks with his thoughts. So we know what he was thinking and what he was doing. There's lots of recorded material with him. Maya Angelou also had Mars in Aquarius. And she said one striking thing, the need for change bulldozed a road down the center of my mind. Isn't that descriptive of a person who was a civil rights activist? Okay, and I've got Rachel Maddow, of course, she's in here too, with Mars and Jupiter in Aquarius. And she says, activism is setting a goal of something you would like to be different and figuring out what would you have to change to achieve that goal. It's sort of like math. Now, I've got a lot more, but I realize we're getting towards the end of the show, and there's a couple more things I want to say. So those are some people that at least those are names throwing out that they have that Aquarian energy. Now, as an aside, I wanted to mention Albert Einstein because I always think of him with Aquarius, but he had his sun in Pisces and he had his Mercury, Venus, and Saturn in Aries. And the more you know about astrology, the more that makes sense. But his Jupiter was in Aquarius, but that's why he's not in this list today. But of course, brilliant person who used Aquarian energy to expand, literally, all of his incredible insights. But wrapping up today, I just want to say in the next few weeks, it's going to be interesting. And not just because of these Aquarian planets, but remember they don't exist in a vacuum. So while these planets, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, are in Aquarius, they're linking up with Pluto. They're all going to meet with Pluto. And we cannot lose sight of that profound influence of change and how our minds may be changed. Lots of things, it could be a very just striking time in our lives, or it could be a time that we don't even realize something's going on and then we recognize later that's when it happened. That's when something, one little click got turned. So that energy is going to be very interesting. And also, what are those planets doing? They're also going to be squaring Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius, because Uranus is still over in Taurus. So yeah, I think a lot of people are going to have that urgency of needing breakthrough in their lives. It's going to be a big deal. But as we leave it, there's a couple ideas I do want to leave with you, which is this is also a week and a time where it's incredibly invaluable to listen to your own inner guidance. That's Aquarius, but listen to your own inner guidance and know that effective action is grounded in right timing. It's not about just flipping the door open and running out and screaming into the night. It's right timing. And inspiration and dreams matter little when we fail to provide an appropriate channel for them to manifest. So don't be in a hurry or buy into others' urgency or be scared into either activity or inactivity. Listen to yourself, trust your guidance, for you are truly unique and have your own responses. Allow things to awaken in your life. Allow them to awaken. Trust the process. Okay, and I know I need to wrap this up, but heads up, guys, guess what's happening next week? Neptune enters Aries. And that's going to be a long cycle. Remember, that's 13 to 14 years. So we will be talking about that next week. We're going to kind of move right into Aries energy. So everybody, hey, thanks for joining me today. And I'm sorry I was kind of behind the eight ball here and wasn't looking at the chat room. But thank you so much for coming over there and joining me. And thanks to our producer, Serena. I hope that you'll stay tuned for Empowerment coming up next with Kelly Whitstone. You can find her on 12 Radio or on her YouTube channel. And here's your quote of the week. And it's simple. This is Leonardo da Vinci. I awoke only to find that the rest of the world was still asleep. And I'll bet you that was something that he thought a lot. This is CA signing out. You can find me for personal sessions on 12listen.com. Please feel free to request a scheduled call at a time that's good for you, because I do work with a lot of appointments. You have been listening to Everyday Astrology with CA Brooks on 12 Radio and streaming on YouTube, where we are changing the way we listen to the world.